let's move in. The number one question we get asked these days is, when are you moving in? So it's not a simple answer. Why don't I show you what's all going on around here, and then maybe you'll get a better idea of when we can move in. Hi, I'm Heidi with Broadmeadow Farm, and today we're going to go around our new house just to give you a heads up of all of the things that need to be done before we can move in. And here's a little teaser. It's certainly not going to be this year, 2020. So I'm standing here in the garage, and I'm not sure if you can see behind me, but there is this giant trench crevice hole, and that is actually where one of those giant beams that supported the house were, and it had to get slid out of the house somewhere. And so if you look here, this giant hole we had to fill in on Monday. There was another giant hole here that also had to get filled in. So Arlen built a box, we stuffed insulation in there, and then our crew guys are gonna come this week and they have to fill this giant hole up. And actually this hole was also where that beam slid through. So you can see this giant hole has to be filled in as well. Over here, you can see there's another giant hole. You can see our garage door didn't quite fit. We're going to reframe that and give us a new door. So once they fill this giant trench up here in the garage, what they're going to have to do is finish backfilling and bring the grade of the clay down a little bit, because here behind me, grade is a little bit too high for the concrete to be poured in here on the floor. So the dirt guys are going to come in, they'll bring it down to the correct layer, and then in the new year, our concrete flooring gentleman will come in and he will make sure that everything is leveled the way he wants it, and then we'll be pouring concrete in here. And that will kind of get this room all wrapped up. So now let's move around a little bit on the outside and see some of the things that needed to get done out here. Actually, on Friday, we had the natural gas come in, and it's actually just a bit of a temporary meter. We don't have our permit yet to have full natural gas, but what we do have is a permit for temporary heat, so we can run a construction heater once we get all of the holes filled in, so that we can thaw out that basement floor so they can eventually pour the concrete for that. So that was one of the first things that happened here on Friday. On this side of the house, we have a little bit more backfilling that had to come in, and if you can see, here is a hole where a beam had to go out. Here's also a beam hole, and this is our temporary construction heat. So we have to figure out a way to seal that up so we don't lose all of that construction heat. This here is an electrical line which will head out behind me to my greenhouse in the future. This here is the electrical line that comes directly into the house. So you can see there's some work here that needs to be done. And we actually have purchased a new door, and we're going to be doing a new window here. On the inside of the wall, we ended up having to tear some things out, which I'll show you next. Also out here, I don't know if you can see because I'm pretty short, but way up here on the roof, we used to have a giant brick fireplace, and it was really too heavy to move for the house. So there is a giant hole up here in the roof that is today's project, because there is snow in the forecast. So we want to make sure we get that massive hole sealed up and put shingles on. That's probably our number one priority today. As we continue around the property, you can see we don't have any windows yet, and we're not quite sure when those windows are going to be arriving. So what we'll be doing in the meantime is we'll just be boarding them up with some plywood just to get that seal and some insulation in there, so that when we run that construction heater, we're actually thawing the ground and not wasting all of our heat to outside. How about this? This giant catastrophe or mess, that will probably be tackled in the spring, at least for siding. So one of the things we need to do before it gets too miserable is we have to actually take this little jut out roof off. We'll have to Tyvek, which is kind of like a waterproof membrane that gets put on the outside of a house. And we're not going to worry about putting siding on there until spring, because we're hoping to do siding on the entire house. But this wall definitely needs to be sealed up for the elements. And then on the inside, of course, we'll have to insulate it and put drywall on it so that we're not losing heat through that room. As we continue down this side of the house, it's a bit of a mess yet too. And you can see here we've got a big trench, and these trenches here we got one here, and we got another one here, and this is where they slid those giant beams out. So we've got to frame this in a little bit. This giant opening looks way too big, so the window will be about here, and then we'll have to frame this up, put insulation in there, plywood on both sides so that it's smaller for the window. So of course this needs to get done before we can move in too. Keep coming here to the front door. We don't have any steps yet, and actually we've decided that we're not going to tackle this front step area till spring. You can see that there's lots of rough grade. It's really lumpy and bumpy. We don't have any steps yet, and in fact that door opener, the little thumb thingy, is really jammed, and so we're not even going to tackle this door till spring. We're just going to leave it locked, and when we have people over, we'll let them in through the garage door because I don't got time for figuring that out right now. Back here towards the garage, we decided that we were going to add an extra man door. That's what this little spot here in the concrete's all about. So we have to cut out this spot and put in a door. So it's been a couple days since I filmed last, and all of those little things I was showing you outside, some of them have been able to get done, and let's kind of see what we have to do here on the inside of the house. So this is that first little living room off the kitchen, and you can see here, this is where the giant fireplace was. And over the weekend, we actually got that hole in the roof fixed, which is wonderful because we actually had a huge dump of snow. You can see here in the roof, we do have to fix this spot before we can move in. And there is a giant hole under this piece of plywood as well. So kind of our hope is that in the future we will put a wood stove in here. Not kind of sure when that will happen. Now when we come a little bit farther down the house, you'll see in the master bathroom we have a bit of work to do. See that it's really, it's not move-in ready. We're actually not going to be doing a whole lot in here before we move in. We will, however, though, be fixing this wall, putting in insulation into it, getting it sheetrocked, and we'll clean up all of the mess in here. All of this wall here, parts of it will be coming out, but we're not going to do any of the plumbing until after we move in. There's another bathroom in this house, so we don't need to have this one right away. We will have the rough-in plumbing, though, however, done in the basement. So here in the house, we're kind of at the back door. We've actually got that new door put in, and we've got the new window put in. We had to actually tear a bunch of things out here on this wall because the plumbing was really not to code. So what our plumber had recommended is that we pull the electrical out from the wall and the plumbing from the wall. Then we're going to build a little pony false wall. That way all of our plumbing can be hidden inside the wall, where it's an inside wall technically and not an outside wall, because you can't put plumbing in an exterior wall. So if you remember a few minutes ago I was sharing with you there was a giant hole in the garage. Well, now you can see it's been filled in, and actually our Suburban here can fit in. Yesterday was Friday the 23rd, and Fortis was actually able to come and finally connect our power. So as you can see, we have lights down here in the basement. But throughout the whole week, we actually had all of our electrical put in. We got all of the electrical for the upstairs part of the house connected into the panel so that when the power did actually get turned on, we could turn it on. Also, we had all sorts of plumbing put in, because when they cut the house off the original foundation, obviously all of the plumbing is disconnected from the joist level down. So all of those toilets and sinks and faucets and all of that had to be connected somehow to our basement. So we had a plumber come in. So all of this here had to get done this week as well. It's unfortunate we didn't get power early enough that they could run lights here, but it's all done, and that's great. So today will be our last day that we'll work on the house a little bit, probably until Boxing Day. We're going to take the afternoon of today off, which is Christmas Eve, and of course Christmas Day off, but we'll be back on here on Boxing Day. And we've got a furnace that we've got hooked up now for the basement anyway, and the reason we have that furnace going right now is we actually have to thaw our ground before we can pour our concrete floor. And what we're hearing from people in the area who've done this before, it'll take about a week of running the furnace before the ground is thawed enough for them to put the in-floor heat pipes in and get ready to pour the concrete. there's a rundown of some of the major projects that we have on the go here before we can move in. So when do you think we'll move in? Leave your guesses down below in the comments and we'll see who comes in closest. My guess is that we'll be moving in the last week of January or the first week in February. Fingers crossed that we don't run into any other snags that delay anything. Of course, we are still weather dependent here on this project with the fact that we have to thaw the ground down below before we can get the concrete in. So that's my predictions that we'll be in the last week of January, first week in February. If you're interested in following along and seeing what kind of projects we've got on the go here with this house, make sure you click that like and subscribe button down below, and you'll get notified if you click the bell as well. That way you won't miss any of our videos as they get posted. Thanks for coming along, and Merry Christmas, and we will see you next week.